So, you love sport. If it's foul play and dirty tactics you like, then check out The Traitors, Uncloaked.
I know it's a game of deception, but it's a game of trust. You have to get people to trust you very quickly.
I'm Ed Gamble. Join me as we discuss all the latest drama from the Traitors' Castle, with exclusive access to the banished and murdered contestants.
No!
I would have never expected him at all.
The Traitors Uncloaked. Listen only on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Jane Lewis and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, insights and analysis you need. It's Tuesday the 23rd of January, I know already, can you believe it? And coming up today...
Oh, a goal, lads! 6 in a row for the main man! What a goal from Lawrence Shankland.
As he continues to be linked with a move, will Lawrence Shankland be back in the Hearts team to face Dundee tonight? And speaking of the Dark Blues, how will they benefit from a talent-sharing deal with English Premiership side Burnley?
I think the Scottish football side is very, very interesting, and I think that it is very attractive for a number of clubs.
And
even for a club of size Ayr United, we had 50 applicants for the role. We've spoken to some really credible people. Hopefully we can make the right decision this week and get somebody in that can turn us back up the league again.
as Ayr United prepare for a crucial Championship relegation battle, is Scott Brown the right man to lead the managerless Honest Men?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Ryan Stevenson, former Hearts and Ayr United midfielder. Ryan, I don't think we could have planned it any better for the ideal guest you are on this podcast, given that both your teams are in action later on today and they're very much involved in the talking points as well. How are you? You well?
Yeah, all good, thank you, all good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're very welcome. And Jordan Campbell of The Athletic also joined us. You raring to go, Jordan? Plenty to talk about?
Yeah, as always.
Good stuff. Lots to get through then with Ryan and Jordan. But firstly, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Lawrence Shankland is back in the Hearts squad for tonight's game at home to Dundee after missing Saturday's Scottish Cup win over Spartans with illness. Sticking in the capital, Hibs have signed attacking midfielder Emiliano Marcondes on loan from Bournemouth for the rest of the season. Burnley have agreed a talent share deal with Dundee, with the Clarets already sending Owen Dodgson and Dara Costello on loan to Dens this month. The SPFL have confirmed that the 2024-25 season will start on the 3rd of August and there will be no Premiership winter break for the first time in 4 years. And the twice-postponed Scottish Cup fourth round tie between Brora Rangers and Cove Rangers is now planned to go ahead on Tuesday the 30th of January after, guess what, it was called off again last night. Well, let's start with tonight's action, shall we, in the Scottish Premiership. It's 3rd against 7th as Hearts take on Dundee at Tynecastle. Jordan, there were very much mixed fortunes for both teams in the Cup at the weekend. How do you see this one going?
Hearts have come into a good run of form the last couple of months. Things were obviously looking a little bit shaky for Stephen Naismith if you go back 3-4 months ago, but they seem to have found their footing. Players come back from injuries and they found a bit of a settled side. So no, I probably fancy Hearts at home to get the job done, and especially with, you said Lawrence Shankland, 18 goals already this season. He's looking good to beat his record of 28 last season, and I think he's just becoming that sort of status. He's got that status about him now that he is a player that teams fear now. You just think he's going to score every single game, and I think if people were looking last season thinking, oh, maybe the penalties inflate his numbers a little bit, I think 11 out of his 24 were penalties. I think he missed 2 this season, so he's not been inflating his numbers that way. So I just think he's getting better and better. Shankland, his all-round game, the way he can drop in and link things, everything goes through him at Hearts. And I think you actually saw the drop-off when the cup game, that he's just so important to Hearts. And if they can't, it's so important for them to try and get him tied down, because I think if he runs into these last 12 months of his contract in the summer, then there's teams who maybe put off the 3 or 4 million price tag who would definitely fancy taking a 28-year-old Lauren Shankland for half the price.
Yeah, he's certainly in good form, isn't he, Ryan? Jordan there talked about his numbers, 18 goals in total, 13 goals in the league in 21 appearances. How key will it be that he comes back in for Hearts this evening, given it's a big game? They want to keep this winning run going, don't they? I think they're unbeaten their last 6 games, so they want to keep that momentum going.
I think in general, it's his Hearts at the moment. I think when you look at the goals he scored now, I think the next to him and Vargas now, I think with 3 or 4, which is a massive, massive gap. So he's vitally important. I think as Jordan said as well, for Stephen, being under a bit of pressure at the start of the season from the fans and some of the results weren't going their way. I think if Lawrence was to get his head swayed or he was to move, I think Stephen would then become under major pressure again, and he'll know that. I think when you rely so heavily on one player, which Hearts at the moment do, and Lawrence, it's so vital that they keep him at the club, they keep him fit, they keep him healthy, because you've seen obviously in this part of the season just how vital he is to Hearts.
As a former player, what is it like when you're hearing, reading all this speculation about yourself? How difficult is it to get the head down and to concentrate on the job in hand?
Well, I never really added that much to the so listen, it can be difficult. I think when not just on loans, I think it can be difficult in the full squad. I think when you rely so heavy on one person, I've had it before where players have been moving on in clubs, and every morning you go on and you're checking online or you're checking the papers to see what's happening. For Lawrence personally, I know Lawrence, I think that he'll manage to deal with it. I think that when there's press going about saying how well you're doing and there's all this rumour mill, it can go one or two ways. I think it will go the right way for Lawrence, and Lawrence will just keep his head down. He's captain of the club. He's a good guy. He's very level-headed, and I think that he'll just keep doing his talking on the park. I think everyone behind him, I think he'll know that himself. If he just keeps doing what he's doing, scoring goals and being so important for Hearts, at some stage, whether it's January or the summer or next year, bigger clubs will come calling. That's just the nature of the beast.
Hearts obviously in action this evening. They take on Dundee. This is a big game for Dundee as well, isn't it, Ryan? They've kind of lost their way a little bit. Obviously, they lost to Kilmarnock in the Cup at the weekend. They've not won in their last 3, only 1 win in their last 7. They need to start picking up points, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, every game's massive. I think once you get over the Christmas period and you go into January, that's when you start properly looking at leagues and things become a bit more jittery and a bit more nervous, and points become ever so precious. And I think for Dundee, they need to go and try and pick up points. I think they'll be difficult to break down. Tony Dalton's got a wealth of experience, and I'm sure he'll set them up to be difficult to play against, to put the sort of pressure on Hearts to come out and try and get at them, and hopefully they'll look at it as can they catch them on the break or can they nick something. I think first and foremost it'll be difficult to beat. I think for Dundee, if Dundee go to Tynecastle and come away with anything, then it's a positive for Dundee. But yeah, I think now the league sort of starts to take shape and points become ever so important.
Well, also this evening, Stirling Albion take on Montrose in League One, and in the Championship, it's 9th placed Ayr. They host bottom club Arbroath. Ryan, this is a huge game for your former side Ayr, a huge game for both clubs really, only 2 points separating them. It's going to be close, you would sense?
Yeah, I was at the Ayr game on Saturday against Kelty. I've been at a few Ayr games this year, and it's been disappointing, I think, obviously in the back of last year and how well they've done. I think Ayr are in a difficult position just now. I think they're doing lots off the park. They're building a new stand. New chairman's come in and done great things. But there's always that fear. You can have a new stand and you can have all that stuff going well off the park. If the product isn't right on the park and they end up in League One, it will be absolutely disastrous. So massive pressure. I think when they've obviously not been the manager, there's obviously rumours of Scott coming in, but that's not been appointed yet. But I think the pressure all tonight is 100% all on Ayr, so it's how they deal with it.
Yeah, the Scott you refer to is Scott Brown, who's been heavily linked with a return to management and that, of course, that vacancy at Somerset Park. Jordan, would that be a good fit? Is that what the club needs, a young up-and-coming manager who brings in fresh ideas?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Graham Mathey, sporting director, spoke about that as well. They want someone who is, still got to climb that mountain managerially and wants to prove themselves. Obviously had 16 months at Fleetwood. Obviously didn't end too well at the start of this season, but I think you see now what Charlie Adams inherited there at the bottom of the league, that that it's not a great squad they've got, so he's got a big challenge himself to try and turn that around. But you look at some of the other clubs that Scott Brown's been linked with, Forest Green Rovers, you look at the last year or so there, you would think avoid that at all costs. And as Ryan was saying, you've got the new stand at Ayr, you've got the new Somerset hub that the chairman built. I went to see Graham Matthew and Lee Bullen and Dave Smith just over a year ago, and they say things were looking really up. There was talk about there's not for a long time. Ayer's just coasted along, been in League One, sort of got up to Championship, and then really apart from Ian McCall getting to the playoffs, it's just been the sense that there's just been drifting and not really there's been no excitement really. So no, I think Scott Brown's such a big name in Scottish football, obviously such a storied player at Celtic. I think that would do wonders for them in terms of a profile as well, helping them attract players. So no, it ticks a lot of boxes, I think.
Ryan, does it tick boxes for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think as Jordan said, I think just the profile. I think they need. I've done a question and answer thing last week with some of the fans, and I said I think Ayr needs someone with profile. They need someone that's going to come in and drive standards. There's going to be a winner. It's all these things together. As I said, they're doing great work off the park, but if the product on the park isn't good, then it's kind of all for nothing. And I think what Scott will do is he'll demand winning. He'll demand, as I said, that standard day in, day out at training. He'll try and drive the club forward. I think regardless of the time he's had down in England, I mean, that was only his first ever job as a manager. He'll learn so much from that. It'll be tricky. As I said, I've watched it. I was at the game on Saturday, and there's a good part of the game that they were a bit sticky, even though they were out 3-0 in the end. And I think the position they're in, I think what Ayr need to do is they need to get him in sooner rather than later. Ideally, I'd like to have seen him in for the game tonight, just to give the fans a lift, to give the place a lift, because it certainly needs it just now. But I think what Ayr needs ultimately is someone who will drive the standards. They've got that in the chairman and Graham behind the scenes, and I think having the manager that can only be a positive for the club.
Interesting developments from Dundee last night. It was announced that they've agreed a talent share deal with English Premiership side Burnley, a move the Claret owners ALK Capital says will create fresh opportunities for both clubs to pursue their shared ambition. This is what their chairman Alan Pace had to say on BBC Radio Scotland's Good Morning Scotland earlier today.
For us, this has been something that we've been looking at for a while before we came into the game as to how we could, best look at, player development across, Europe as a whole. And we thought that, the best place to start was very, very close to home. So not too far away, and the chance to send players back and forth and work on coaching, development together and some of the other aspects of talent development. But I think the Scottish football side is very, very interesting, especially from, being south of the border here in England. I think that there's just, a lot more still to come, and let's see what happens. You're very aware that there's other clubs that are looking at, Scotland as an opportunity as well. So I don't think we're alone, and I think that it is very attractive for a number of clubs.
Well, Jordan, first of all, what do you make of this arrangement?
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted on it, because on one hand, I can see the value in sharing knowledge and, getting friendlies between different teams, different opponents for young players. But then on the other hand, I think back to Dundee United and Fulham, I think Hibs and Brighton, which was announced a couple of years ago, and then 42 days later, Brighton send Alex Cochrane on loan to Hearts. And you're thinking, well, how serious is this relationship, if you're strengthening your city rivals? So, I mean, they would probably say that these deals are focusing more on the youth players. But, from a Scottish football fan perspective, there's been an exodus of talent at 16-year-olds since Brexit, where English Premiership teams are just absolutely raiding Scotland since the GBE rules changed. So I think Scottish teams have got to focus on producing their own players, because the numbers right now are really quite stark in the Premiership. It's like 7% of the minutes across the whole league have been given to club-trained players. It's pretty abysmal when you look at it. We're probably the fifth bottom in Europe when it comes to that. So I get the attraction of, it's a Premiership team and potentially you've got a route to sell players, but I don't think you're going to be getting any extra money from them, because they're still going to be looking to poach them at the earliest opportunity. So, I wouldn't think it's going to be too much value for either side, to be honest. But I suppose you can't judge it until you've seen it. But if it's anything like the other ones, I think it's a bit superficial.
Ryan, I suppose in an ideal world, it works for both parties, doesn't it? Jordan's talking about the exodus of players going down south, but you could also see some promising talent coming up to Dundee as well. And if that works, if it works both ways, could you see it being beneficial?
Yeah, probably about like Jordan, I'm a bit sceptical with it. I think, listen, in an ideal world, what Dundee would want is the boys who are maybe breaking through into the first team down in Burnley come up for maybe 6-7 months on loan, do really well, and then they go back down to Burnley and they get to the first team. I think sometimes it doesn't really work like that. I think all of this sort of kind of builds a bit of hype that off the park Dundee are sort of in conjunction with Burnley and kind of drives a bit of media attention. But I think when you go and you look at it through the nuts and the bolts of it, I don't really think it will work.
If Burnley start sending boys like Owen Beck level that they had on loan for Liverpool, then I think everybody would say great. But like Ryan's probably played with boys as well who get sent on their first loan from England, and you could count in probably one hand how many times a boy from England on his first loan copes with the intensity and physicality of Scottish football. So I think it depends on the standards you're getting. You know, if it is an own Beck, but he's away back to Liverpool, and you know maybe they'll get him back on loan, but you know it's not your own player, is it? So he's either going to stay there or he'll come back to Dundee. So maybe it'll work out for them, but. Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I'm sceptical as to the level of player that they'll have available to them.
Yeah, you two are not impressed with this at all. I can sense. It's interesting as well when they talk about the maybe the potential relationship between the clubs as well. You know, you maybe get Tony Docherty on the phone to Vincent Kompany and talking about kind of managerial tactics and all the rest of it. But for you, Jordan, is it a bit pie in the sky?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there'll be some sharing at youth level, but to me, I just think it's blocking the pathway for young boys in Scotland, and like we've already got enough obstacles in the road because there's hardly any boys playing in the league. I think it's sort of been missed because the national team's doing well. Is that where are the next boys coming through? Where are the next boys? Aaron Hickey's, where are they in the league? There's not too many of them. So yeah, I just worry that it's just creating more obstacles for young Scottish players.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, before we go, in case you've forgotten, the transfer window is still open, and Hibs, as we said earlier, have announced the signing of Danish midfielder Emiliano Marcondes on loan from Bournemouth for the rest of the season. Is he a player that you know, Jordan? What might he offer the Easter Road club?
To be honest, I know him more for what he's done off the park because he's quite an interesting character. I think he's suffered a couple of bad injuries, so he's not really played the last couple of years, but he obviously came through at Nordsland and you know, was a goal-scoring attacking midfielder, but hasn't played too much at Bournemouth. But you know, off the field, I think he's been studying for an undergrad in global football management. He started his own company as well, Visionary Athletes, which is all about sort of helping footballers while they're still playing to discover a hobby and take an interest in other things to try and prepare them for life after football. So no, he seems to be a really switched-on guy, and yeah, he's clearly got a good level. So I think if he comes back for his injury and he can reach that level he was at in Denmark, and even when he first came over to Brentford, then he should add something.
Yeah, I suppose that might be the slight concern, Ryan. He hasn't played an awful lot of football recently, as Jordan alluded to, because of that injury. They've already, Hibs, got the likes of Joe Newell and Dylan Levitt kind of in that position in midfield. Is it what they need? Do they need another attacking midfielder, do you think?
Well, I mean, you can never have enough attacking power in your team. I think sometimes just in general in January, if clubs are sort of struggling or the manager feels that they just need a body in, because sometimes one body come in could just totally freshen up training, it can freshen up the boys. Just a new face coming in, you'd be surprised just behind the scenes Monday to Friday what that can do. I think for the player personally, it's about coming and trying to get minutes into himself to try kick on again in his career. So I think for him it's a win-win. I think for the player it's win-win. You come in, as I said, it's a fresh face and you get in about the boys. and hopefully for the player, if he comes here and does well for Hibs, it can kick on his own career personally.
Time to wrap things up on the Scottish Football Podcast. My thanks to Ryan Stevenson and Jordan Campbell, and thank you for listening as well. Remember, our email address is scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk. Drop us a line if you've got any comments or questions for us. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe and follow the Scottish Football Podcast so you don't miss an episode. As I say, thank you very much for listening. Thanks to the chaps as well. Scottish football continues, and it's covered right here across BBC Scotland. Bye-bye for now.
The winter transfer window is braving the British weather and is wide open once again.
More drama, more twists, more turns.
I'm Kay Curd, and every weekday throughout January I'll be joined by Luke Edwards and some of the country's best football journalists to dissect the day's transfer rumours.
From BBC Radio 5 Live, the Transfer Gossip Daily Podcast.
Who will your team buy, sell, loan, or even just be heavily linked with, only to lose out to your rivals?
What will happen next?
Keep up to date with all the comings and goings straight from the rumour mill with the Transfer Gossip Daily Podcast. Listen on BBC Sounds.